What's up, my wizards? It's Dev from MTG here today with a deck tech, a budget deck tech, as a matter of fact, for white-black warriors. I've been working on this for a while, talking about it for a while, pretty excited about it. And yeah, I am here today to show you what you can do with white-black warriors with just about 50 bucks in your bank account. So let's go ahead and dive right in and let you know what's in this thing, because people are pretty excited about white-black warriors. They want to know if it's going to be a thing in standard, and we're still not 100% sure, but we got some key pieces in Dragons of Tarkir. So let's go. Well, the deck runs 10 one-drop creatures, and they all have some relevance later on in the game, which is good. They're not just dead drops later on. Terrible top decks, what have you. Blood-Soaked Champion, you run 4 of. He's really good with Blood-Chin Fanatic. Fantastic interaction there. 4 Mardu Woe Reapers, that helps you out against some reanimation decks, delve decks, and things like that. And 2 Dragon Hunters. Time will tell how important that is. There's only 2 in the deck, but this will later on in the game help you maybe help you block big fatties and things like that. But early on, it's a 1-mana 2/1, and that's cool. So yeah, the 1-drops in this deck, I decided to only run 10. I know some people want to run like Tormented Hero and stuff like that too, but I decided to strictly run. Tormented Hero is a terrible top deck. So I only wanted to run things that are relevant at all points in the game to some extent. The deck runs 12 2-drops, and these are among the most significant creatures in the deck. A no-brainer is 4 Chief of the Edge. You absolutely need this. It's obviously among one of the top 3, I would say the number 3 actually, most important card in the deck. Some people would say number 1, but there's definitely at least one more card that's more important than this. Blood-Chin Rager is, I think, the number 1 no-brainer inclusion in this deck. You play a 4 of. This is better than Chief, I would say. You get your guys through so easily, especially against your mid-range and your control. You run right through even if they have a guy. So even against other aggro decks, this really helps you win the race, which is very important because other aggro decks are very prevalent right now, and that's what you're going to have a lot of problems with. They say that Warrior's biggest weakness is that it first of all, it's one of the weakest aggro decks in the format. It loses to other aggro decks. Because it really doesn't have much help. Warriors is all about on-board effects as opposed to other things like Jeskai is obviously non-creature spells, very oriented there. Red-white tokens uses token-generating spells and things like that, not just straight-up creatures. There are on-board effects in those decks, don't get me wrong, but almost everything in this deck adds to the next card or creates some sort of on-board advantage for you. And Blood-Chin Rager is very good at that. He is an auto-include. Another card that's very good against other aggro decks is Battle Brawler when it gets the first strike. This goes up against a lot of stuff in other aggro decks and survives once it gets that bonus. And so Battle Brawler, he was just a 3 of at the beginning, but ended up being a 4 of. I wanted to run a couple more creatures, and he was definitely the guy, I think. So Battle Brawler will help you out in a lot of situations, and he's quick damage. Fast damage equals good. I mean, 2-mana 3/2 first strike is... Those are great stats. So you play 4 of this guy. So that's all the 2-drops right there. These guys create, first of all, the fact that Brawler is so good against other aggro decks is very important. Blood-Chin Rager not only helps you get through other aggro decks, but good mid-range decks, things that would normally stop you when they play a Courser and then a Siege Rhino on the next turn. That would normally be, lights out. But this will help you a lot in getting past and through those creatures. And Chief of the Edge, obviously, is just, you need this in the deck. You absolutely need this. It's auto-include. The deck runs 8 3-drops, and I'm thinking about cutting at least one of these, but let's go ahead. Blood-Chin Fanatic, you definitely play 4 of. I think this is another one of the top 3 most relevant creatures in this deck. It gives it a lot of long game, helps it finish strong. It does a lot, kind of Disciple of the Vault kind of tricks, if anyone remembers playing Affinity. This card does very well. It sucks that the mana investment's relatively high, but later on in the game when all you need is that extra couple of points, then, it's not hard to pour, 6 mana into Fanatic and just win, honestly, deal 9 and just win. So Fanatic is just fantastic and helps you win the race against other aggro decks, again. Very important theme in this deck because, mono red aggro crushes you, Jeskai aggro crushes you, so you have to deal with that. Blue-white aggro you also have an issue with, blue-white heroic. So you have to be able to keep up the pace with those decks, and Blood-Chin Fanatic helps you out very well there. But it's more for getting that last, 6 points of damage through. The other 4 3-drops are 4 copies of Arashin Foremost, and that's the card I might drop down to 3. Arashin Foremost, don't get me wrong, is very good. A big thing with this is that it's one of the main deck cards that takes out Courser of Krufix just sort of naturally. Because Courser is a problem creature for this deck. So, aside from that, I mean, just giving one of your other warriors double strike is pretty crazy. I think we can agree that making your Battle Brawler or your other chief do 6 damage is pretty effing relevant, and that even if they block it, with a huge guy, that double strike dude's probably going to take it out. So, yeah, very relevant card. I just don't know if I want to run 8 3-drops. You see what I mean? The deck only runs 1 4-drop, and that's 3 copies of Brutal Horde Chief. Obviously a pretty important creature. It's in the top maybe 5 creatures in the deck. It's not as important as people might assume that it would be at first, but it is still very good, again, for getting those last few points of damage in, and it, again, helps you race. Those points of life that you gain can be very important if you can get this guy to stick and be a thing. Well, the deck runs 33 creatures right now, and that's blitz levels of creatures. That's way up there. So what spells does the deck run? We only have room for about 4 spells. So what do we pick? Now, very flexible slots here, but this is what I went with. I went with 2 Ajani's Presence, first and foremost. Contending for this slot were also God's Willing and Feet of Resistance, and those are both very, very good cards. But I went with Ajani's Presence mostly to survive board wipe, mass removal. I think that we're going to see a lot more blue-white control in this format with the advent of Narset and Ojutai's control and Ojutai himself. So we may see a little bit more blue-white control. And yeah, this is very good against End Hostilities and obviously Crux of Fate. And a couple of other, mass removal spells, I think Anger of the Gods. So this could help you a lot. And the +1/+1 thing is that's no slouch either. This will help you defeat other creatures in combat that try to block your guys, help you against spot removal, and in the same way that God's Willing would. And it will help you survive mass removal, which I think is very, very relevant right now. So I went with Ajani's Presence over God's Willing. Mostly, I understand God's Willing and Feet of Resistance can get your guys through for extra damage, and that's pretty important. But I think we have enough against other aggro decks and mid-range decks, main board, and especially the sideboard, to deal and use Ajani's Presence. That extra, power toughness is important, and we really, really need to be able to play around mass removal. So I went with Ajani's Presence over a couple of other cards that could have been included there. I went with 1 copy, just the silver bullet, of Secure the Wastes. I am really interested in this card, and I want to know whether or not it's good. So I just went with the 1 copy of Secure the Waste. I have played it in testing, and I've gotten 4 guys off of it, and that was quite relevant because I did have a chief out. So Secure the Waste does have synergy with a lot of stuff. Has synergy with Blood-Chin Rager, those guys will get through. Has synergy with Blood-Chin Fanatic. You can get a little bit of extra damage through and gain some life. So there's a lot of cool stuff that you can do with Secure the Wastes. And instant speed is important. So I went with at least the 1 copy to just see how it goes. I'm very intrigued by this card. Another card I'm super intrigued by and included 1 copy of, and I don't know, you guys might not totally agree with me on this, but I went with 1 copy in the main of Corpse Weft. I think, again, this helps your long game tremendously, and if you can get it to stick against control, then I think that this will go a long way in you winning the game. A card that I really considered over this, but it ended up in the board, was Mastery of the Unseen, for similar reasons to this card. But I really want to try out Corpse Weft. I want to know how relevant that is, especially against control decks and decks that remove your creatures a lot and stuff like that. So, interested in Corpse Weft. Have not played it in testing. I've play tested about 7 games, and I have not I've seen it, but I have not actually played it. I won the game before I played it. So it might come out. It may move to the board, but I think Corpse Weft may be a thing, and I want to test this out. So let me know what you guys think about Secure the Waste and Corpse Weft in this deck. We'll talk about that. I want to have a discussion. That's all the spells. So what are the lands like? Now, I wanted to keep this budget, totally budget. So right now, there are 4 Caves of Koilos in the deck, which you can get for about $1.75 on TCG Player. There are 10 swamps and there are 9 plains. That's 23 lands. You need a little bit more swamps. There, you need to activate your Blood-Chin Fanatic. There's way more black creatures in the deck overall, so definitely that. Although you need some plains, your 1-drop creatures are predominantly white, so you definitely need the plains. And you need the 2 white for Arashin Foremost. If you wanted to jazz this deck up, the lands are what would cost the most. The main deck would stay more or less exactly the same, except for the flexible spell slots. You can do with those what you wish. But if you wanted to add some real flexibility to this deck, you could put in Mana Confluences, Urborg, black and white, fetch lands and stuff like that. Perhaps 1 or 2. I think it's Temple of Malice, the black-white. Maybe it's Temple of Silence. I always mix up the Theros Skylands. But anyway, you could add these lands, and that would cost you a pretty penny, but it would definitely bring the consistency of the deck up, absolutely. But the deck is fine running, swamps and plains, but it needs those 4 Caves of Koilos. I think you absolutely do need those. Another idea would be just to put in tri-lands or the gain lands, if you really want to. But the deck does not benefit well from tap lands at all. You want to play as fast as you possibly can because you're already slower than a lot of the other aggro variants in the format. So let's move on to the sideboard here. I'm going to go over this real quick. I've gone over the sideboard over and over and over and changed a lot of things, but I think this is a fairly good board here. So let me let you know quickly what I've got. I've got a 3rd copy of Ajani's Presence to fill out against mostly control so that you can, again, survive board wipe. That's incredibly important. I've got 2 copies of God's Willing. That's mostly against red-white and straight-up mono-red aggro, so you can survive spot removal and get your guys through, because that's going to somewhat be important against a bunch of tokens. I've got 2 copies of Valorous Stance. Valorous Stance is important for a few reasons. Again, against spot removal and mass removal, it's incredibly good. And against cards like Siege Rhino and, yeah, it's a good card. Against Abzan, pretty much. I have in here 3 copies of Erase. That's, again, to get around Courser. Whip decks could be a thing. And there's lots of enchantments in the format right now, and gods are a thing sometimes. So you definitely need 3 copies of some enchantment busting thing. Originally it was Abzan Advantage. I wanted the bolster in this aggro deck, but I think Erase is just strictly better in every way. It's good to get the counter, but Erase I think is more relevant and not as mana hungry, so that's good too. 2 Mastery of the Unseen in this board. This is, again, against control. I think the control matchup is a problem for us in a lot of ways. There are a lot of matchups that are issues, and that's why people are kind of cold on Warriors, so I'm trying to fix those matchups as much as possible. Mastery, manifest the top card of your library is just insane against control decks and against a lot of decks. Against aggro, that first ability, the gain of life when you flip a guy up, that will help you win the race, but we already have a lot of stuff that does that, I think. It's that second ability that's more relevant, and that's against control. Similarly, against control, we have a 2nd copy of Corpse Weft in the sideboard. This, again, is an experimental sideboard slot. I know there could be other things done with this slot, but I want to try out Corpse Weft, man. I want to know if this is actually relevant against control specifically, or if maybe Mastery is a better card, period. But I think that Corpse Weft is maybe a thing, and I want to try this out. I want to board it in against control and see. And then to finish off the sideboard, 2 copies of Virulent Plague, a new card from DTK2. This, I think, will not hurt you like Drown in Sorrow would. Kill some of your guys. You don't have any token creatures in the deck except for maybe if you play Secure the Wastes, but you'd board that out. Put this... Actually, there are 2 more cards in the sideboard, now that I think about it. There are 2 copies of Seeker of the Way in the sideboard because this is a warrior, and every spell in the sideboard is a non-creature spell. So... if you board out some stuff to put in your spells, I think that you can probably board out a couple of guys to put in Seeker of the Way, because he'll get instantly more relevant when you put in Ajani's Presence and God's Willings and stuff like that, Virulent Plague even, non-creature spell Erase. So Seeker of the Way has a place in the deck once you add the spells, but there aren't enough main deck spells to really power him at all. So I think he does have a place in the sideboard, though. And that's 15 cards right there. So that's budget white-black warriors. This will take you anywhere between $45-50 to make if you order through TCG Player. MTG Goldfish will also be around $50-55. So, you know, I think that this is a fairly competitive deck, especially in a slightly more casual environment like an F&M or something. I don't know that I'd take this up to a Grand Prix or PTQ or anything, but if you familiarize yourself with this deck enough, it does feel like this deck is really good and much better, much better than it was just a month ago. The addition of Blood-Chin Fanatic and Blood-Chin Rager, the two Blood-Chin cards, is just monumental. It makes a huge difference in this deck. Fanatic is just incredible in the long game, and Rager helps you beat other aggro, race just so well. So very important cards that got added to the deck. Foremost, not so much, but Foremost is still an important card. Sort of the Silverblade Paladin of the deck, and it helps you get guys through for way more damage than you really should. So it feels like a good card when you're playing it, but do we want to play 8 for 3-drops? Do we want to play 8 3-drops? That's another thing I want to discuss in the comments. Should we play 8 3-drops, guys? So yeah, for now, I think I'm probably going to go ahead and sign out. Like, share, comment, subscribe, do all of that stuff with this deck. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time with another deck tech. We do draft videos and stuff like that. So subscribe to our channel and we'll do some more things. And you guys will probably enjoy those videos every bit as much as you did this, because I have a feeling you enjoyed this video. I'm Dev from Strictly Better MTG with White Black Budget Warriors. And I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching, Wizards.